Hello, welcome to the Hey Boomer Show, which is live each Monday on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and then available the next day on your favorite podcast app. My name is Wendy Green, and I am your host for Hey Boomer. And Hey Boomer is for those of us who believe we are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. It is for lifelong learners who have found meaning and are finding meaning and purpose in their lives and are living their best lives into this new chapter. We at Hey Boomer are on a push to grow our Hey Boomer Walk to End Alzheimer's team. And what I would like to do is welcome our newest walk member, Kathy McAfee. She joined our Greenville, South Carolina team. We also have Melanie Whitlock, who is out in Clear Lake, California, and you can join her team, her Hey Boomer team, or Bernadette Wagner. She's having a team out in Hagerstown, Maryland. Everybody who joins the team is going to get a cute Hey Boomer hat that you can wear for the walk, and you can wear afterwards with great pride because you are a boomer. So join our team, any of these teams, by going to act.alz.org/go-to/heyboomer. And if you don't want to walk with us or you feel like you can't, you can still go ahead and contribute so that we can find a cure and end this disease, and meanwhile help people that are still going through the disease. I also wanted to mention the What's Next group coaching program. This program helps answer the question, who am I now? Who do I want to be? Will I ever feel useful and productive in society again? And what is my value to my family, my community, my society, now that I am no longer fully employed or following my career path? At the end of the 6-week program, you will have a 6-month plan and possibly a 12-month plan. And the next cohort begins on September the 20th. And let me show you how you can reach out. You can go to calendly.com/heyboomer/20min, and we can set up a free 20-minute consultation, find out where you're at, where you want to be, see if this makes sense to you, or you don't have to talk to me if you don't want to. You can just check out the program at heyboomer.biz/coaching and learn all about it. It really can be a program that can move you into your next chapter with great comfort and ease. So let's get to what we're talking about today. And I've been struggling with this topic a little bit. The toxicity of the wellness culture. I mean, I mostly try to eat healthy. Excuse me. I take supplements. I exercise most of the time, probably not as much as I should. And I have to admit, I am a fair weather walker and hiker. When it is cold and rainy, I am not the one that's out there. But I do get uncomfortable when the scale says I've gained a few pounds. And all of these beliefs about weight and fitness and, behaviors, these all are reinforced by my family and by the media. We all hear comments like, oh, she's really put on some weight. Or, well, wouldn't she be pretty if she just lost some weight? Advertisements and TV shows portray happy, slender people and not so happy, larger people. And if they're heavy, older people, the images can be even more demeaning. So preparing for this show has shown me how much I've bought into these ideas that fat is bad and skinny is good. Did you know that we as a society spend over $35 billion on diet products annually? It is a lucrative industry. And diet culture is that collective set of social expectations telling us that there's one way to be and one way to look and one way to eat so that we are a better person and we're a more worthy person if our bodies are in that mold that we all hear about. So today we're going to dissect what it is meant by the wellness culture, how it can be toxic, and how it affects us as we age. And I really want you to join in and ask questions because, a lot of this is learning for me, and I'm sure it's learning for you. So feel free to join us. And let me bring on our expert today. Her name is Debra Benfield. Hi, Deb.
Hi, Wendy. Hey, everybody.
So Debra invites you to join her on the intersection of pro-aging and body liberation on her newest website, debrabenfield.com. From her experience, she understands how aging creates vulnerability to the ageist diet wellness culture and how frustrating it is to find a profound lack of body respect in the pro-aging movement. And I had to check with her on that quote because I was like, wait, pro-aging, aren't we like all about accepting where we are? Well, you're going to hear about some of how it's not accepting. Deb is a registered dietitian nutritionist with over 35 years of experience in that field. She's also a registered yoga teacher. She is the founder and owner of Body and Mind Nutrition, a group practice of registered dietitians and nutritionists. And like I said, the founder of her newest site, which is more focused on the aging. She'll tell us more about that, debrabenfield.com. She's passionate about preventing and treating disordered eating and eating disorders and supporting you in feeling more comfortable and confident in your relationship with food, eating, and your body. So, Deb, tell me how you got into this field in the first place, and then kind of what your journey has been to move more into the aging space.
Well, I first want to thank you. I really appreciate your openness to this conversation because I know it's kind of tricky and surprising to think about how the pro-aging movement may have some problems with how we look at bodies. Mm-hmm. And I think that may be more true for women's bodies. I also want to say that my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I want to talk just a minute about my vocabulary. You will hear me say obesity right now as a word that I will not be saying any further. I believe that the way we talk about bodies further stigmatizes and pathologizes bodies that are fat. And fat, in my worldview, is a descriptor. Just like you have red hair, Wendy, I believe. It's just a descriptor of who you are. I have brown eyes. So it's a description of me. So fat, in my worldview, is not a pejorative. It's a description. So you'll hear me say fat and not the ob-goggling words. And I'll talk a lot more about that later, too. So I got into this because I really like talking to people as whole human beings. So when I started my career, I pretty quickly started referring clients to therapists to talk about issues outside of what was going on in their eating and their relationship with their bodies. And I happened to develop a relationship with a therapist that was amazing. Her name is Joan Wilkins, and she was my supervisor, and her specialty was eating disorders. So I very early in my career started developing this curiosity and interest in learning more, and it's just kind of become what I do. And I'm very passionate about the work. It's very rewarding to to watch and work with a woman who starts to become more powerful in her life and doesn't kind of give her power away by wanting to shrink herself. So I hope that's
And
enough.
so,
We're going to be talking a
well,
lot
and
more about
so,
that.
we talked about the early time, getting into the eating disorders, but now you're moving into
Yes.
how it's affecting us as we age.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what brought your interest there?
Well, I will be 64 in December. And when I turned 60, I also became a grandmother for the first time.
Oh,
And
congratulations.
thank you. And so something happened in my head where I just wanted to do more research on what we know to be true about how to support aging with vitality. And being who I am and understanding what I understand about diet and wellness culture, I was absolutely shocked by how the anti-aging messages hit me hard and fast. I had to get through what I consider to be a bunch of bullshit. I didn't ask you if I can say those kinds of words on your show.
Of course you can. This is an adult
Okay.
show.
Okay. But it just felt like I had to weed through a lot of things that I knew were not based in science. And I knew were very ageist and what I consider to be fat phobic. So I quickly saw that I had to dig a little deeper, and I really couldn't find what I was looking for. So I realized that I wanted to create what I think people are needing, what I needed to start with. And it's been fascinating to me to really look at how you can support aging with vitality without getting pulled into all of the you must lose weight.
Yeah. So I want to talk about those biases, and I want to talk about internal biases, right? Because
Yes.
those certainly do hold us back. I mean, and we have more control over those than we do some of the external biases we hear from the media. So in my world, I talk about living an engaged, meaningful life and getting over that internal bias of I'm too old, I don't have the energy anymore, I don't learn as quickly, and shifting that message. In your world, it's more about eating and diet and weight and fitness. And so what are some of the messages that you hear that are internal biases, and how do we address those?
Yeah. I think that I really love that we're kind of focused on a particular group of people right now, because coming of age, when we all came of age, I went back and looked at the timeline of how women's bodies were portrayed in the media. In the 40s and 50s, women's curvy and voluptuous bodies were heralded as the ideal, the beauty ideal. And as a matter of fact, there is evidence of like ads for weight gain products during
Really?
that time. Yes, I'll show you. But there are like, you can't be too skinny in the 40s and 50s. That's not appealing. Now, of course, all of this is marketed to women.
Right.
And then guess what happened in the 60s? Twiggy entered our lexicon, and the diet industry took hold and just blew up. And women quickly believed they had to be like Twiggy, and which, in my opinion, is unachievable and ridiculously thin and likely fragile. And if you pursue that kind of ideal, you have to diet. I mean, that's what happened, is the women believed that in order to be beautiful, in order to be valued, in order to have worth, they must diet. So I don't know if you watched Mad Men.
I watched some of that, yeah.
I think the character Betty Draper is an amazing character to talk about when it comes to this, because that show took place when all of this happened, and it's set in that time period. And I think they did a great job of showing what happened, especially with women in that time. And she joined Weight Watchers, and that was the classic choice. And they show her in several shows, going back into the kitchen and, sneaking her food and actually binging the foods that she was deprived of. So it's really interesting to look at how in the 60s, the diet industry took hold because women felt to be worthy, to be loved, to be valued, they must be thin. And I really feel like that's where it really shifted in a big way. And also what you're describing about the money that was to be made based on that. And there are a lot of people that believe that it's not surprising that that's also when the women's movement was taking place, and that perhaps it was kind of this interesting way to get women to be disempowered. If they're really focused on dieting, they won't have as much of a voice. They won't have as much power. So Naomi Wolf's book, The Beauty Myth, is a wonderful book to read if you want to dig into that concept.
Interesting.
And she's not the only one that believes that, but that book is very powerful.
And what's interesting, Debra, is that if that started in the 60s, here we are, 60 years later, and it's still going on. I mean, I can look in my cabinet. I have the whole body diet. I have, Diet for a Small Planet. I have South Beach Diet. I have like all these books because I'm like, oh gosh, I've got to lose a little weight. And every trend changes. It's like, oh, okay, don't eat carbs. Well, now you should eat carbs. Don't eat fruit. Well, now you should eat fruit. It's like, count calories. Don't count calories. And it's so confusing. And no wonder it creates disordered eating. I don't know about eating disorders. So, maybe you can differentiate that for me because I don't understand that.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that. I don't know if you want to jump into that now, but I think we need to talk. I know it's way outside the scope of the show to get too detailed about eating disorders, but I think it is helpful to look at what is normal and what is disordered and what is an actual diagnosable eating disorder. Yeah. Do you want to do that now?
Well, first of all, Anila says, what was the name of that book you mentioned?
It is titled The Beauty Myth.
The Beauty Myth. Okay.
And the author is Naomi Wolf.
Okay.
It was written quite a while ago, but it's exceptional when you look into the principle that we're talking about.
So yeah, we can go one of two ways. Why don't you describe the difference right now, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the dieting and intuitive eating. How about that?
Okay. So perhaps I feel that eating occurs on a continuum, and most of us kind of travel up and down that continuum, hopefully not too far toward disordered eating. But normal eating is easy. Normal eating is messy. It's eating when you're hungry, when your body says it's time to eat, and stopping when you're full. And eating a variety of foods that satisfy you so that you can actually notice when you're satisfied and full. It is not being in your head, counting and calculating and tracking at all. It is only listening to your body and therefore not struggling with feeling guilty or even ashamed of what you're doing. So there's no reaction in your emotional life and there's no space taken up in your head. You're very simply, easily eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're satisfied. And disordered eating is likely getting much more in your head with it, much more rule-based, much more tracking, and therefore more reaction, more, I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I hope not.
Yes, we can. Is that your
Oh,
phone?
sorry. Yeah, I thought all that was turned off. Let's see, where was I?
Disordered
Disordered
eating.
eating is more in your head, following rules, and therefore feeling like you're being bad if you've eaten something that you've decided is bad. And eating disorders are, we have many. We have anorexia nervosa, we have bulimia nervosa, we have binge eating disorder, we have ARFID, which is a new diagnosis, relatively new. ARFID stands for, I hope I get all this right, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. And it's really about having a negative experience like choking or vomiting that's creating an anxiety about eating, or a sensory issue where there are many foods that you feel like you can't eat, that you can only eat a shorter list of foods. And there's also something called OSFED, which is basically a group of disorders that don't fit into any other boxes. So it's like a catch-all phrase, but there's a disorder to the point of, some debilitation in your lifestyle. So we can break each of these down. There's a lot to talk about with each
I
of
know.
them.
This is where I get hung up, because when you describe normal eating, just, eat what you want, when you want, until you're full. I mean, I think I had mentioned this to you once, like if I had a plate of chocolate chip cookies here, which is my go-to dessert, and I have a refrigerator with carrot, celery, and lettuce, I'm going for the chocolate chip cookies every time.
Okay.
It tastes good. It's easier than putting together a salad. How's that normal eating? Of course, I'm probably going to beat myself up about it and say, why did you do that? That's not good for you. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say, you mentioned before that, there was this diet and that diet, and sometimes they contradict each other. I do want to say that probably every single client that I work with comes to me with that particular feeling of overwhelm by all the different kinds of diets that have, they've heard about, feeling like kind of lost in like, which way do I go? Because they're so contradictory. And also, also really noticing that they feel kind of like they have forgotten how to eat. Like actually, like I forgot how to eat. I've lost my way because of all the diets that they've been on. And they may not have a full-blown eating disorder, but they are feeling all those things. So trying to find their way back. So the way that we find your way back is by trying to get out of your head and starting to realize that your body carries innate wisdom, that your body actually knows when you need to be nourished and what foods would nourish you and when you've had enough. Now, there's a look on your face that is the look on most people's faces. It's like, I can't believe that could possibly be true. But if you think about, if you've been around a baby, you know that a baby cries a very distinct, I'm hungry cry. It's very distinct. And babies pull away when they've had enough, when they're satisfied. We know that if children are allowed to eat with the structure of, family meals with, some security around the fact that there will be food and there's a variety provided without a lot of food rules, without a lot of judgment, without pressure, that over time they will eat a variety of foods and their bodies will go where their bodies are genetically dictated to go. And sadly, nobody really allows that to happen. I think it's more and more true because parents are being taught that this is the way to actually raise competent eaters, to prevent children from getting eating disorders, because eating disorders are very much on the increase right now. And we're all born with that capacity. It's the culture, the cultural messages, the diets, the millions, billions of dollars that market those diets that make us no longer trust ourselves.
Yeah, I think you're right about parents today. I know when I was raising my kids, again, I went through all these different diets, tofu and
Yep.
vegetarian, and then no, we're
Mhm.
having roast beef and whatever. And, my daughter, and this is where, was it because I was putting the pressure on or not? But she didn't want to eat what I was cooking. And I was like, this is healthy food. You need to be eating this.
Yeah.
And she does not do that to her kids. And
Yeah.
and we
Mhm.
got into some battles over food,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and Martha makes the point that even when we were young moms, we had our
Mhm.
babies on a schedule,
Yeah.
every 3
Yeah.
hours you need to eat. And, da, da, da. And so
Yeah.
we were raised with that belief that
Yeah.
there is a right way and a wrong way to
Yeah.
eat. How do we undo that?
Well, boy, I don't even know which way to go with this. There's so much to talk about. When I was a mom, young mom, I was already a dietitian, so I was reading certain things. And the reading that there were folks that were telling young moms to follow the baby-led weaning.
Hmm.
There was that phenomenon that we should stay out of the way. And I don't know if you want to get into all this, but Ellen Satter is the woman's name who wrote all of those books. Those books were available in the 80s and they're still available. There's also a new book called Intuitive Eating for Kids. So it's like parenting with intuitive eating. So this can be prevented, or we can develop a little bit more resilience in our children when they hit all the diet messages when they get to school or when they go to grandmother's house, because I think that's what you're describing. I don't know. I've heard so many clients talk about that rub in the family around what people say to the children about how they're eating. If you think as the grandmother that there are certain rules or that you have concerns about the size of your grandchildren's bodies, you can get all into like, well, do you really need that? Or like, should you eat your vegetables before you get your cookies? All the things. You clean your plate or not clean your plate. All those things are not helpful. The children actually can be trusted to feed themselves well if we stay out of the way. Again, very hard for people to believe, but the more you follow this intuitive eating way of feeding yourself and your family, the more you'll prevent disordered eating and eating disorders. So that's why I'm talking about it. And, we haven't gotten into aging bodies yet. That's a whole nother
Oh,
conversation.
right. Aging bodies. Yeah. And I think June raises a good question here. Eating because we're hungry, or are we eating because we're angry, or we're bored,
Yeah,
or we're lonely, or we're
yeah,
tired, or
yeah.
um,
Yes. So discerning that, you can't discern that if you're not slowing down and paying attention. So the principles of intuitive eating, we're way into this really fast.
yeah, let it go.
The principles of intuitive eating start with ditching diet mentality. You have to get rid of the good, bad list in your head first
Hmm.
so that you can really listen to your body. If you're still in your head with, well, I shouldn't have this or I should have that, it's very hard to get the discernment, to give yourself space for this discernment. So to slow down and eat as mindfully as you can. I know we're all really distracted and moving really fast. So it's not that easy to slow down and notice your body. I'm a yoga teacher, and the reason I'm a yoga teacher is because I think you have to have embodiment practices where you kind of ground yourself, like perhaps if you say grace or if you try to have gratitude for the food in front of you, to also notice your body. And I do this because this is what I do. I put my hands on my heart and my belly to notice like my own body's hunger first. And the principles of intuitive eating are to dismantle diet culture in your head, to notice your hunger sensation, to eat foods that are satisfying, and we can talk more about that, so that you can stop when you're full. And emotional eating, as the question that's in front of us, that's very real. Emotional eating's normal human behavior. Nobody likes to hear that either. Is actually, that's very normal. And can you develop some skills that help you manage your emotions in other ways as well, so that you have choices? Like, I know I'm really angry, so I need to like go punch the pillows, or go for a walk, or call a friend, or write in my journal, or just sit and let yourself feel, let yourself ride the wave of anger, because it does pass.
All right. So
It's a lot. It's a lot.
That's a lot, not
a lot.
easy. I
Yeah,
mean, you
it's
started by
simple, but not
saying,
easy.
yeah. Okay, good. There's the distinction, because I'm going to say you started by saying normal eating is simple, but it's not easy to be mindful, to slow yourself down, to be out in a group or to feel frustrated and not want to just go grab a chocolate bar or something. So let's talk about the aging, right?
Okay.
So easy for me to see how the anti-aging movement is displaying perfect bodies and get rid of the wrinkles and all of that. And they're trying to sell something, just like the diet industry. But talk to me about how the pro-aging industry is not respecting the way we look.
Well, what I am noticing on social media especially is a lot of thin white bodies. So the person who taught me the most about all of these issues in our culture is Sonia Renee Taylor. She wrote a book called The Body Is Not an Apology.
The body is not an apology. Okay.
And she talks about how we live in a culture that has a body hierarchy. The default body that's at the top, that everybody knows without knowing, is thin, young, male, heterosexual, cisgendered, able-bodied, white, probably neuronormative, all of those things. That kind of body, people that live with that kind of body, have power and easily belong in our culture. If you are anything other than that, and you may have one or more things that are not in that description, you're more in the margins, therefore more marginalized. We marginalize people based on their bodies. And the more marginalized you are, the more marginalized your identity is, the more you're at risk of wanting to be thin. Because the feeling is, well, I can at least be thin. If I am a woman, I can at least be thin. If I'm old, I can at least be thin. If I'm disabled, I can at least be thin.
Right.
If I'm black or brown, I can at least be thin, because it brings you into feeling like you may belong. You may have more of a sense of power in our culture.
You're not quite as invisible either.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So there's increased pressure to be thin as you age. And if you have any other marginalized identity, it's even more so.
In fact, I noticed in the most recent AARP magazine, they're all about pro-aging, right? One of their articles was how to stay thin if you're a chef. It's like, I would not even have noticed that, Deb, if I hadn't been talking to you. But yeah, it's like
There's a lot of pressure.
there is a lot of pressure.
There's a lot of
There's a
pressure.
lot of pressure. But okay, now I'm going to be devil's advocate.
Okay.
But we hear that
Yes.
if you are overweight,
Mhm.
it's hard on your heart. You're at
Mhm.
risk for diabetes. It's
Mhm.
harder on your joints.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not healthy.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that image that we have, that belief that we've been told from the medical world and
Mhm.
for years?
Mhm.
I mean, even with COVID, oh, you're more at risk if you're overweight.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know,
You know, I have so many references for what I'm about to say. This is not my opinion. I try not to say anything that's my opinion because I am an old-fashioned scientist. I really like to read and learn and speak with an expert's, kind of status and through that lens. So what I'm going to say is I can send you lots of links to articles and podcasts, etc. So all of the research that talks about, I'm going to say the medical term, obesity, causes hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, even COVID. And not that it caused COVID. We can talk about that in just a minute. But all of that research is correlational and not causal. We have no causal research that shows that being a certain weight causes a disease process. What we have is certain activity patterns, certain particular dietary patterns, definitely genetics, definitely stress. There are many things that we actually do have research on that causes those diseases. And people have assumed because of correlation that's correlated, but it's actually the behavior. I have worked with many folks that are fat, that have high levels of fitness, that have perfect labs. I've worked with very thin folks that are not at all fit and that have high cholesterol, diabetes, hypertension. You cannot tell by looking at somebody that they're healthy. Being thin does not equal healthy. Losing weight does not equal healthy. As a matter of fact, what we also know is that yo-yoing, weight cycling, actually does cause hypertension and other aspects of heart disease. So we also know that 95% of people who go on diets regain the weight plus. So I'm sorry, my phone is so busy. So dieting is not a solution.
so if I understand you right, what you're saying is that being fat does not cause hypertension, does not cause diabetes. It's the lifestyle around that's causing those illnesses.
It's the particular kinds of behaviors, and it may be genetic. It may be stress and anxiety. We also know that having trauma experiences, especially early in life, is related to certain body sizes and diseases. So it's much more complicated than we assume. We make a lot of assumptions that make it very black and white and simplified. And there's a lot of problems with that because then people who are in fat bodies are stigmatized. They especially are stigmatized in the healthcare setting.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of stress, and we also have research that weight stigma is a stressor that can contribute to disease process. So it's such a mess.
Because you're afraid to go to the doctor because you're going to be embarrassed.
And it's how you're treated when you do go to the doctor.
Mm,
There's shame, there's fat shame, there's body
mm,
shame
mm,
that's experienced.
mm.
That's very legit.
There's so
But
much.
yeah, it's very, very messy. It's not, I'm afraid in our culture, we see it very simply that losing weight is good, being thinner is good, certain foods are superfoods and good. And it's so much more complicated. Then there's also access to food. I think that we actually believe that there is a moral value to food and a moral value to thinness. That people are better people if they're thinner, and that eating certain foods are good. I mean, if you listen to what people say, I'm being sinful.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I mean, it gets really convoluted pretty quickly.
I still need to learn a lot to shift my beliefs and to think that I'm not going to eat those chocolate chip cookies instead of the salad.
Well, something we should talk about with intuitive eating is that there is a psychological phenomenon called habituation. That if you have something that you're deprived of course you want to eat it all. That's a normal reaction to deprivation. If you have permission to eat the food consistently, like if you start to bring chocolate chip cookies in and you eat them, you know you can eat them and you know you can have them whenever you're hungry again, you will start to lose interest in the chocolate chip cookies.
Hmm.
Over time, you habituate to the
Okay.
cookies and they have less and less and less power over you.
Okay. Well, we're getting towards the end here. I mean, we
Wow.
could probably talk for another couple of hours on
Very,
this. But
there's so much to talk about.
I know. But give me a couple of takeaways that those of us who are just learning about this for the first time, what we can do to take this into this next chapter of our lives as we are aging.
I think the first thing is to wrap your head around the fact that all bodies are worthy. I mean, we can't white knuckle and control our bodies into a particular size and shape. As a matter of fact, the more you try to do that, the more likely you are to get disordered in your eating. And you could end up with an eating disorder. And we didn't really get into that very much today, but it's a real problem with midlife and older women because you do feel like you can't control your body. And the more you white knuckle, the more disordered you become. So trying to be a little bit more compassionate with yourself and understanding that all bodies are worthy, number one. Number two, to try to, in my research, what I've found is the things that really contribute to aging with vitality and protective of getting disordered in your eating are moving your body so that it feels like play. So it's just like play, you have some joy in it. Trying to be socially connected. Trying to actually manage your stress, which I know is easier said than done. And to eat, with an intuitive eating mindset. All of that is protective and supports vital aging. So I don't know if that's enough takeaways.
Yeah, thanks. I'm I'm going to learn more about this intuitive eating because I certainly can do the good bad thing.
Yeah.
So if you want to reach out to Debra, you can email her at Deb at Debra Benfield, BENFIELD.com. You can find her on Instagram at Aging Body Liberation. And check out her new website. In fact, Deb, you have some kind of coaching program that's getting ready to start. Quickly tell us about that.
I'm doing what I've been talking about today. I'm doing intuitive eating through the lens of pro-aging. Yeah, it's a group coaching cohort that begins the end of September.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sure we could all use some help on understanding that. So her website is Debra, Debra, Benfield, Benfield.com. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. And let me remind people about our Walk to End Alzheimer's. Please join our team at act.alz.org/go-to/heyboomer. And check out also at the end of September, September 20th, our Hey Boomer coaching, the What's Next After Your Full-Time Career. And that's at heyboomer.biz/coaching. So my guest for next week, her name is Melanie Gordon, and she's the founder of Do, Love, Walk Collective. And one of the programs Melanie offers through the collective are Ubuntu circles. And I wrote a blog about Ubuntu probably a year ago, and it just fascinates me. So in the Ubuntu circles, they address empathy, social isolation, belongingness, compassion, and reconciliation. And the groups gather for a weekend retreat or 8 weekly sessions or extended experiences. So join me next week to learn more about Melanie Gordon and Ubuntu circles. And I'd like to leave you all with the belief that we can live with passion, live with relevance, and live with courage. And remember, we are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer.